Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, critical hours for Iran. The U.S. envoy to the UN says all options are on the table as a U.S. carrier task force heads to the region. Plus, crying out for freedom. Iranian activist Goldie Ghamari recalls her country before the Islamic Revolution and shares her hope for the future. And Christian leaders receive a warm welcome from Israeli President Isaac Herzog. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell, joined in our studio by the newest member of our staff, Joshua Swanson. Joshua, welcome.
Thank you, Chris. Delighted to be working with you, truly, during these historic times.
Historic times indeed throughout the Middle East. And the people of Iran and the Middle East are waiting to see when and how President Trump will address the nearly 3-week rebellion against the Islamic regime. And the U.S. has an armada on the way to the Middle East. One day after he encouraged Iranians to keep protesting, President Trump said he's been told the killings have stopped.
We have been informed by very important sources on the other side, and they've said the killing has stopped and the executions won't take place. There was supposed to be a lot of executions today, and that the executions won't take place, and we're going to find out.
Iran's foreign minister told Fox News there are no plans for executions, and there's been no protests for several days. Others tell a different story.
But there are some Iranians who have been able to get a hold of friends or family inside. And what they are saying is that the situation is incredibly dire. The amount of casualties is higher than what's even being reported in the media.
Iranian-born activist Goldie Ghamari tells CBN News the protests have come to a breaking point.
So it really is now or never, because what Iranians are saying is that if we do not overthrow the regime, then every single person who has been slaughtered these last few days, it will all have been in vain.
She says the regime is waging war on its people to survive.
It's war. It's war out there. Iranians are unarmed, and the Islamic regime, the Islamic dictatorship, they've now brought in their proxy forces like Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis, and all of that was funded by the Islamic Republic. So those same terrorist groups are murdering Iranians as well.
Iranian rapper Miraj Tirani managed to escape the country. In tears, he described what he saw and pleaded for help.
جهنمو دیدم تو ایران این چند روز جهنمو دیدم گناه داریم خیلی گناه داریم فقط کمک خارجی چیزا رو غرق میکنن تو سر سینه شلیک مستقیم بی‌رحمانه دارن میکشن همه رو.
One forensic doctor says the wounds from many of those killed indicate snipers from a high elevation. The internet blackout is now in its 7th day, and some reports indicate the regime may introduce their own domestic internet. Yet some videos like this one on Instagram show crowds shouting death to the dictator. Throughout the region, preparations are underway for a potential confrontation between the U.S. and Iran. Some U.S. personnel have been told to leave the U.S. base in Qatar, and a U.S. carrier strike group is on its way to the Middle East. And here in Israel, the country is preparing for a possible Iranian retaliation if the U.S. attacks. If the regime does fall, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, who many see as a transitional leader, said Iran would be a friend to the free world.
In security and foreign policy, Iran's nuclear military program will end. In diplomacy, relations with the United States will be normalized, and our friendship with America and her people will be restored.
In the meantime, the White House announced the launch of Phase 2 of the Gaza peace plan. The plan would establish a temporary technocratic Palestinian administration in Gaza, begin full disarmament of all unauthorized groups, and start reconstruction. Even with reports of up to 30,000 killed, Iranian-born activist Dr. Amir Hamidi tells CBN News the uprising continues and springs from the heart of the Iranian people.
From Azerbaijan to Balochistan to Kurdistan to southern part of Iran, from Tehran to Tabriz to Mashhad, I hear one voice, and they want to regime change. They want a freedom, they want a normal life.
Hamidi says the regime has enlisted foreign mercenaries to break the rebellion.
They are growing allegations that Tehran is leaning on allied militia from Iraq, Hashd al-Sha'bis and Fatimiyun and other proxy networks to intimidate and attack Iranians because some elements of its own forces hesitating, fracturing, and refusing to fire on their own people.
Are you actually saying, as you referred to, actually some of the military refusing to actually fire on the protesters?
That's what I'm hearing, because they are falling apart inside their military forces because they see their own family in the street. They see their friends and their neighbors on the streets. And then my understanding, some of them are hesitant to fire back on the people.
This Iranian woman, whose father is part of the regime, risked her life by calling in to a talk show. With a message that help is on the way, Iranians are looking for U.S. intervention. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Task Force is on the way to the region, but there are some reports Trump has decided not to intervene.
The truth is, only President Trump knows what he's going to do, and a very, very small team of advisors are read into his thinking on that.
U.S. Ambassador to the UN Michael Wall says the U.S. supports the Iranian people risking their lives for freedom.
Well, this is our message. President Donald J. Trump and the United States of America stands by the brave people of Iran. Period.
The delay so far by the U.S. is disappointing to Iranians, but some analysts say President Trump sent similar messages before attacking Iran's nuclear sites last June. He also needs time to put military assets in place. If the Iranian regime does fall, many believe it would be a game changer of historic proportions. Exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi explained on his Facebook page how Iran would be different.
In security and foreign policy, Iran's nuclear military program will end. Support for terrorist groups will cease immediately. A free Iran will work with regional and global partners to confront terrorism, organized crime, drug trafficking, and extremist Islamism. In diplomacy, relations with the United States will be normalized, and our friendship with America and her people will be restored.
Restored relations with America would be a sea change from a regime that daily calls for death to the U.S. Well, you know, Joshua, I think the people that we've talked to, Goldie, Ghamari, I've talked to Amir Hamidi, I think we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg of the desperation of the people. We heard from the Iranian rapper. We heard from this lady calling into a talk show. I mean, there are millions of people that are just so desperate for freedom right now.
Oh, well, and you can see why. If the military is just firing and the police firing indiscriminately into crowds and shooting people, we read reports of people being targeted, their heads and their eyes being targeted. The violence is unprecedented, and 30,000+, Chris.
Yeah.
I mean, that's 10 times what we saw on 9/11.
On 9/11, exactly. And so, could this be the tipping point? I mean, that's the question many people are asking. And is what President Trump will do in the U.S., is it enough? Yeah, well, and you mentioned Goldie. She said the word war. That's the first time I've heard that word, and of course it's framed that way. This is a civil war. The people are rising up against their government in Iran, and they're in a war. Yeah, and there's a sense, I think, with some people that even if the U.S. doesn't intervene, they've made their decision. They're going to keep going, no matter what. No question. Yeah. Well, up next, Iranian human rights activist Goldie Ghamari, who we just talked about, reports on the latest from Iran and the people's hopes for freedom ahead. It's been devastating to see the carnage that's been coming out of Iran for the past 3 weeks now. Joshua? Yeah. Well, the internet has been shut off. Communication has been so sporadic. So absolutely. A few days ago, of course, though, Chris and I had a great opportunity to interview human rights activist Goldie Ghamari. Here's an excerpt from what she shared with us. Goldie, I wanted to ask you, what can be the consequences of this? If the regime does fall, what would be the consequences? First of all, to the people of Iran.
Well, freedom. We would finally have freedom after 47 years. We would finally be free from these savage Islamic terrorists who have been occupying us for the last 47 years. We can finally have a normal country based on the principles of democracy and secularism, like we were prior to 1979. The other thing as well is that we can finally stop being a sponsor of terror or being occupied by a sponsor of terrorism, right? Because prior to 1979, Iran and Israel were allies. And so we're actually looking forward to rekindling that allyship. That's actually one of our top priorities in the transitional plan for when the regime falls, is to reestablish and normalize relationships with Israel.
Goldie, could you double click on that? I know you were born in Iran. What are some of the misconceptions people have about Iran before 1979 or before the revolution?
So some of the misconceptions people have is that it was an authoritarian dictatorship and like people weren't free, and they like to say bad things about our beloved Shah of Iran, but the reality is those are all lies that have been propagated by the Islamists and the communists in order to justify overthrowing Iran and taking over in 1979. Very similar to the propaganda and lies that they put out about Israel. It's the exact same thing. So the communists and Islamists like to paint themselves as the freedom fighters. Meanwhile, of course, we know that these freedom fighters are in fact terrorists. So I would say that that's a big common misconception. Another common misconception is that Iranians are Muslim. We're not. Prior to 1979, perhaps, some people just kind of identified as secular Muslim, but the reality is that today, less than 20% of Iranians identify as Muslim, and this revolution, it's not just about overthrowing the Islamic dictatorship; it's about getting rid of Islam and throwing it out of our country, basically, because we're Iranian, we're not Arab. We have a completely different culture, a completely different civilization, just like the Jewish civilization. We're indigenous to the land of Iran, and the history of Jews and Iranians goes back thousands of years before Islam was invented.
Yeah, Goldie, one of the things that seems about this revolution is that people are rallying around Reza Pahlavi. It seems like in the past, some of the opposition groups have been disorganized or not unified. Is this marks this revolution that people are rallying around Pahlavi to come back and at least be a temporary leader in a transition?
Yes, absolutely. So I think that's one of the defining features and defining factors of this revolution is that everyone has rallied around His Royal Highness Reza Pahlavi, the Crown Prince of Iran. He is the only one that we trust to transition Iran from a totalitarian Islamic dictatorship to a functioning secular democracy. And, people in Iran are only chanting his name, Reza Pahlavi. They're sharing photos where they're holding up images of his face on camera so that people outside can see who they're fighting for, and young people in Iran are saying we are willing to risk our lives if it means we can return our king back to Iran.
On a personal note, Goldie, if I may, how are you feeling watching what's coming out of your home country and what's being done right now, the abuse of your people? How are you feeling?
It's difficult. It's difficult because we know how brutal the regime is and how brutal it has been. But Iranians, we're very brave. We're very strong. We have, we're an ancient civilization that has survived for thousands of years. And so as difficult as it is, seeing the bravery of Iranians in occupied Iran and how they're just, willing to give up everything for freedom, that gives me energy. But more than that, we have received so much love and support from people around the world. People in Israel, people in the United States, people across Europe, South America, like everywhere that I can think of, there are people who are tuning into my live stream, sharing their love, sharing their support, rooting on for the Iranian people. And that gives me a lot of hope, and it's giving all Iranians hope, because now we know that unlike previous times, we're not alone anymore. We're not alone. The whole world is behind us, and the whole world is cheering for us to, you know, as we overthrow one of the most evil dictatorships to have ever been created.
If you'd like to see this entire interview, it can be seen on our CBN News YouTube channel. You know, Joshua, when we talked to Goldie, there were a few things that struck me. First of all, the desire, the hope for freedom, and also the need for prayer. People need to pray, and people have been praying literally around the world.
Absolutely. I think that word freedom is so important. It's something that we in the West take for granted, and there's 90 million people who have been living under this dictator, and they are now hoping to overthrow them and hoping for freedom since, what, 47 years?
Yeah, 47 years. And Goldie really brings to life the fact that before 1979, it was a secular monarchy. It was, you know, you see the pictures of the women or the students from that time. It's like the West. It was the West.
That's right. Well, and the Crown Prince has, according to Goldie, has a very specific plan on how to restore that democracy. So I guess it'll be a constitutional democracy with some sort of a king. I mean, that's probably mirroring something like what the UK has. Either way, freedom. That's the word.
And Goldie has also brought up, she's not a Christian, but she says Christianity is the fastest growing religion, a faith in Iran right now. Just literally maybe well over 1 million believers inside Iran.
Yeah, it's incredible. And to obviously pray for the Iranian people is important. And now knowing there are so many Christian believers that will definitely be persecuted after this, if the Iranian regime is not overthrown, it makes it that much more serious.
Yeah, about 30 seconds left. We're at a tipping point, are we? And isn't it crucial what President Trump does?
Yeah, the next few days, the next few hours even are so important. So many people are risking their lives right now because of what President Trump said. They're hoping that he's going to come through and the U.S. military is going to come to their aid.
Yeah, and I would say the whole Middle East is watching and waiting to see what's going to happen, what he does. And what he does is going to be strong enough, is going to be enough to really tip over this regime. Oh, thanks, Joshua. Well, still ahead, the miracle of a safe haven, celebrating the one place in the Middle East where Christian growth is on the rise. At a time when Christian communities are shrinking across much of the Middle East, Israel stands apart. President Isaac Herzog underscored the country's commitment to religious freedom in a recent reception for Christian leaders. Take a look.
I'm standing at the president's residence where Christian leaders from around the country have gathered to celebrate their annual event with the State of Israel.
Dear friends, your communities are a blessing to the State of Israel. They add richness, texture, depth, and history to our beautiful human tapestry.
For many here, this gathering carries significance far beyond ceremony.
Here in the Middle East, Christian presence is being exterminated. Although we are less than 2% of the population, this is the only Christian population in the Middle East that is actually on the rise.
That growth is echoed by local pastors and leaders who have watched relationships between the church and the state grow deeper over decades.
Israel came out of the Holocaust when it was established. Christians, of course, they were the arch enemy of the Jewish people. Today, the Prime Minister of Israel said evangelical Christians are the best friends of the State of Israel.
Church leaders see this growing trust as rooted in shared values and a commitment to understanding one another as people of faith.
You're human beings created in the image of God with a vision and a passion for this country.
Leaders from Israel's historic churches, many of whom shepherd large and growing congregations, reinforced that with a word of unity.
It's a message of peace, message that we can live together. We can do everything together for the benefit of our faithful, for our country here in Israel. This is our country.
This group also includes those outside the Christian community, underscoring Israel's broader commitment to religious freedom.
This day expresses the cohesion and the coexistence between religions, especially in the State of Israel, regarding what it grants to all citizens and all religions in terms of religious freedom.
At a time when Christians are leaving much of the Middle East, President Herzog made a direct appeal for protecting and strengthening Christian life here.
We are committed to ensuring that Christian communities can continue to grow and thrive with full freedom of religion and worship.
A clear message that Christians are not outsiders in this land. They are part of its present and its future.
We're seeing nothing but growth of relationship, trust, bridge building. I'm very optimistic for the future of our beloved land.
All the Christian leaders, from the historic churches to the evangelical churches, they are here right now. And it shows you, the support that the State of Israel gives to religious communities.
Joshua Swanson, CBN News, Jerusalem.
When we come back, helping one single mother make a better life for her family.
The Bible makes special mention of widows and orphans, and in modern times that includes single parents. CBN Israel was able to hear about one single mother in Israel carrying a heavy load. And thanks to our partners, we were able to give her a hand.
In Jerusalem, single mother Naomi faces an overwhelming daily battle. She is the sole provider for her 3 children, while also caring for her disabled mother who fled the war in Ukraine. Despite juggling multiple jobs, the financial pressure is breaking her as the family struggles to get by in a tiny apartment.
We have 2 bedrooms. My son and I sleep on the couch in the living room. My mother is in 1 bedroom, and the girls share a bedroom. My son's been asking for a desk where he can do his homework. We need more space, but it's hard to find something we can afford that also fits our needs, because my mom is disabled.
For years, Naomi carried this impossible burden all by herself.
We live from paycheck to paycheck. The budget is very tight. Sometimes the budget isn't enough.
Hope arrived when a medical team referred Naomi to CBN Israel. We quickly stepped in, providing food, covering overdue bills, and investing in a new future by paying for Naomi to train for a better job.
I'm so grateful that I can study now. I feel so good inside. I'm so hopeful. It's a great thing that you're doing. You're helping people in such a noble way. I think everyone is very grateful. I know why I'm simply speechless.
What a great story. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell.
Remember, you can follow us on social media, and you can also access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. And don't forget to sign up for our email blasts.
And please keep praying for Israel and Iran, and for divine protection for all those caught in harm's way. I'm Chris Mitchell.
And I'm Joshua Swanson. For all of us here at the Jerusalem Bureau, we'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.